Hey guys, tonight we're dropping you gently, and probably underdressed, into the heart of classical Athens, year 430 BCE. It's early morning. The sun is creeping over Mount Lycabettus, the roosters have declared war on sleep, and your new life as a free, well, mostly free, Athenian citizen begins. You're lying on a straw mat. The room is small, stone-walled, and windowless, unless you count the open arch where mosquitoes come and go like philosophers at a symposium. There's a goat outside chewing loudly on something that might be your sandal. Your tunic itches, your throat is dry, and someone nearby is already debating what justice really means. Welcome to ancient Greece, where even before coffee existed, everyone had opinions. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love knowing who's tuning in from across time zones. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your host is a potter named Menon, who sleeps in the main room with his wife, 3 sons, 2 daughters, and 1 elderly father, who only wakes up to shout that modern youths have no respect for Pythagoras. You don't know what you expected when you signed up for time travel, but it definitely wasn't communal goat-adjacent living with a man whose biggest dream is a better kiln. Menon nudges you awake at dawn with the toe of his sandal and announces that you'll need to fetch water from the public fountain. "Ache the amphora," he says. "It's bigger than your torso. You are not ready." Out on the street, the air smells like dust, olive oil, and the lingering smoke of last night's lamps. Women are already sweeping stoops. Boys are chasing chickens. A man is loudly reciting Homer to no one in particular, except perhaps to shame his illiterate neighbor. You pass a wall plastered with notices, painted announcements for upcoming sacrifices, ship departures, and one listing for a lost cat. The cat is described as arrogant, ungrateful, but dearly missed. Down at the fountain, it's already busy. Women chat while balancing jugs on their heads. An old man eyes your clumsy grip on the amphora and mutters, "Must be Spartan." You're not sure if that's an insult or a compliment, but it stings either way. Carrying the water back nearly breaks your spine. Menon nods approvingly, but still assigns you goat duty, scraping droppings, mending a harness, and swatting flies so persistent you begin to suspect divine punishment. Later that morning, you're invited, forced, to listen to Menon's teenage son deliver his first public speech, a trial run for the agora. It's a heated, shouty defense of why figs should be taxed less than olives. It's passionate, it's weirdly persuasive. You clap politely. So far, you've been in ancient Greece for less than 6 hours. You're hungry, underhydrated, mildly insulted, and increasingly aware that indoor plumbing is not a thing here, and this is just breakfast time. But don't worry. You've still got jury duty, a gymnasium visit, and at least one awkward encounter with a philosopher ahead of you. Ancient Greece is many things: sunny, lively, culturally foundational, but relaxing, not even a little. Breakfast in ancient Athens is not quite what you imagined. There's no coffee, no toast, and definitely no oat milk. What you get instead is barley bread yesterday's, slightly stale, and a diluted splash of wine that tastes faintly of damp amphora. Menon's wife, Damaris, sets the food out without a word, busying herself with a pot of lentils, while keeping one eye on a suspiciously quiet toddler. You sit cross-legged on a woven mat, awkwardly tearing your bread into bite-sized chunks. Around you, the family is already deep in conversation, though conversation here means something closer to a philosophical skirmish. The eldest son, Nicias, insists that a true man eats only figs and cheese until noon, while the middle child argues that beans build character. Damaris just mutters, "Beans build gas," and hands you a dry date. As you chew, you become aware of just how loud breakfast is. Between political arguments, goat bleating, and Menon loudly speculating on whether democracy would survive another year of Alcibiades nonsense, it's hard to concentrate on anything. You're not used to starting your day with so many passionate opinions before the sun has fully cleared the rooftops. Then comes the debate. Not a formal one. This is just the normal Athenian breakfast routine. Today's topic: is it just to follow laws one believes are unjust? You try to stay out of it. You fail. Damaris turns to you suddenly and asks, "Well, should a man obey even when the law is foolish?" You panic and say something about fairness. This results in Nicias quoting part of a play he only half remembers, while Menon uses his wine cup to sketch a rough diagram of a utopian city-state in spilled lentil broth. Historians still argue whether Athenian citizens actually discussed philosophy daily. You remember reading once. Based on this breakfast, it's not only possible, it's exhausting. Just as you're wondering if it's polite to fake choking to leave the table, an unexpected announcement is made. Menon has volunteered you to assist with the olive harvest for the neighbor's grove. You smile weakly and nod, still chewing your bread, now even staler than before. You excuse yourself to find a cloak, mostly to get fresh air. Outside, the sun has climbed higher, warming the clay-tiled roofs and sending a shimmer off the nearby cistern. A street musician plucks a lyre and sings about a man who mistook a dolphin for a god. No one seems surprised. By now your stomach feels odd, not quite full, but not exactly empty either. That might be the wine, or the figs, or the existential crisis sparked by that 5-minute lecture on civic duty from a barefoot child. One thing is clear. Breakfast in ancient Greece is less about nourishment and more about identity. What you eat, how you eat it, and especially what you say while you're eating it, all of it matters. Even the act of reclining or sitting upright carries subtle status implications, though at this point you just settle for a cushion. As you step back into the house, Menon claps you on the shoulder. "Olives await," he grins, "and you'll learn the true meaning of calluses." You smile back, barely. Your breakfast is still sloshing uneasily in your stomach, and your brain is tired from defending moral relativism with half a date in your mouth. You're only 2 hours into your first day in ancient Greece, and already you're longing for the quiet bliss of a modern breakfast. Maybe some cereal, a soft chair, and a chance to form a thought without being challenged by an 8-year-old quoting Plato. The neighbor's olive grove is about a quarter-mile away, which doesn't sound bad until you realize you're making the journey barefoot in a tunic while carrying a basket the size of a medium-sized goat. The path winds through dry fields, buzzing with cicadas. The air smells like warm earth and overripe fruit. Menon's son Nicias leads the way, proudly wielding a hooked stick and lecturing about the soulful connection between a man and his olives. You mostly nod and avoid thistles. Olive trees in ancient Greece aren't tall or grand. They're squat, gnarled, and stubborn, like most of the people around here. Their bark is rough enough to scratch your arms if you brush past, and their branches twist low and tangled, heavy with unripe fruit. Your job, as it turns out, is to climb the trees and shake them, not gently. You hoist yourself up onto the first branch with the grace of someone clearly not from this century. Nicias smirks. "Grip with your knees," he calls, "unless you want to meet the ground early." You grip with your knees. It's uncomfortable. Bees hover nearby. You discover quickly that olive trees host entire ecosystems of ants, and one particularly aggressive lizard. You shake, and olives tumble down into a blanket spread below. The process is repetitive, hot, and sticky. You start to sweat in places you didn't know could sweat. After the 5th tree, your arms ache. Your legs are scratched. you've inhaled a questionable bug. Nicias tosses you a stale barley biscuit as a reward and tells you you're not completely useless. This apparently is high praise. You sit beneath the shade of a tree and nibble at the biscuit. The breeze carries the sound of someone singing in the distance, an old harvesting tune with lyrics about love, sunburn, and possibly regretting your career choices. You wonder if it's normal to feel this tired before noon in ancient Greece. Probably. Olive picking isn't just about the fruit. It's part of the rhythm of rural Greek life. Families tend to groves passed down for generations. Kids grow up learning when to shake and when to snip. The oil isn't just used for cooking, it's fuel for lamps, base for perfumes, payment for debts, even part of religious rituals. Your awkward climbing is, in some tiny way, tied to divine offerings and marketplace haggling alike. Historians still debate how much of the Greek economy relied directly on olive oil, you recall from somewhere. Judging by your current state of filth and fatigue, the answer is probably entirely too much. By the 10th tree, you've stopped swatting away every bee. You've named the lizard on your tree branch. You've entered a kind of olive-induced trance, broken only when Nicias whistles and says it's time to carry the haul back to the press. Don't drop them, he warns, pointing at your overflowing basket. Each one's worth more than your life. You laugh. He doesn't. The walk back is longer somehow. Maybe it's the added weight. Maybe it's the heat bouncing off the stones. You pass a group of kids playing knucklebones and an old woman sweeping her threshold with a bundle of reeds. Everyone seems to know what they're doing here, except you. Back at the pottery shop, Menon greets your return with a grunt. He inspects the olives, nods, and waves you toward a stool in the shade. Not bad, he admits. You didn't cry or pass out. Your hands are raw. Your tunic is dusty. There's olive pulp in your hair. You've been in ancient Greece for less than half a day, and already you look like someone who's lost a bar bet with a time-traveling historian. But here's the thing, you made it through the olive harvest. Sort of. You didn't fall out of the tree and the lizard let you live. That's something. You sit, stretch your legs, and feel the first twinge of something strange, pride, even if you have no idea what happens next. The agora is louder than you expected. It's late morning now, and the heart of Athens is a kaleidoscope of tunics, clashing sandals, and rising voices. You squint against the sun, still recovering from olive duty, and try not to trip on a runaway chicken as you follow Nicias into the crowd. The agora isn't just a marketplace. It's the nerve center of Athenian life, a mix of commerce, gossip, philosophy, pickpockets, and the occasional accidental goat trade. You pass a woman selling garlands of laurel, a man shouting the daily price of garum fish sauce, and someone offering discounted bronze trinkets that look suspiciously melted. Stay close, Nicias warns. You'll get lost and end up listening to a sophist for 3 hours. You cling to the edge of a potter's stall and try to blend in, but your awkward posture and clear lack of historical context make you stand out. A vendor eyes your sandals skeptically. Foreign, he asks. You nod. Thessaly, you nod again. Weird accent, he mutters, and gives you a complimentary olive. You wander past a group of teenagers loudly debating whether Achilles was truly heroic or just deeply insecure. One of them kicks a pebble with the fury of someone who has opinions. A nearby playwright in training mutters iambic verse under his breath while carving it onto a scrap of wax tablet. You sidestep an impromptu puppet show involving a very nervous wooden minotaur. Then you spot it. A man arguing with a statue. You blink. No, really, he's fully engaged in debate with a marble likeness of Athena. She knows, he insists to a growing audience. She sees the tyranny in our democracy, the crowd murmurs approvingly. One person claps. Another offers him a fig. You back away slowly. Despite the chaos, there's something oddly soothing about the noise and motion. The agora is alive. Every step brings a new smell: roasted chickpeas, sun-baked clay, goat sweat, fresh parchment. Every stall promises something strange and specific: locust jerky, owl figurines, sandals made from reclaimed Trojan leather. You approach a table stacked with scrolls. The scribe behind it has ink-stained fingers and a bored expression. "Anything you want copied?" he asks. "We're running a special on Euripides." You politely decline and pick up a scroll about the duties of an Athenian citizen. It's longer than you expected and contains exactly 0 advice on how to stop sweating in a linen tunic. Just as you're about to leave, a trumpet sounds. Everyone freezes. A herald steps into the square and unrolls a scroll. "By order of the assembly," he begins, and you brace for something dramatic. Instead, it's a notification that jury duty assignments have been posted. Nicias groans. "Don't look," he mutters. "If your name's on the list, you have to go." Of course, your name is on the list, in expertly butchered Greek spelling, but close enough. Athenians take jury duty very seriously. It's not just a civic chore, it's a daily feature of their radical democracy. Hundreds of citizens are picked by lot to decide everything from inheritance disputes to major political trials. There's no judge, no lawyers, just a room full of grumpy amateurs and an overwhelming sense of civic pressure. Historians still argue whether these massive juries improved fairness, you recall, or just created a lot of very loud courtrooms. Nicias claps you on the back. "You'll be fine," he says. "Just don't say anything smart." That's how they get you. As the crowd thins and vendors start folding up awnings, you shuffle toward the designated juror tent with a mix of dread and indigestion. You're handed a small wooden token with a number carved into it. No one explains what it means. A man in a purple sash is explaining Athenian property law to a dog. You sit on a bench, exhausted. Around you, people are still debating taxes, food, love, and whether Heracles would make a good babysitter. You realize with some horror, the arguing never stops. It just moves from place to place. You came to the agora to shop. You're leaving with jury duty, an olive, and the distinct sense that nothing in ancient Greece comes without a spirited debate attached. The court building, if you can call it that, is a dusty rectangular structure with no roof, minimal shade, and far too many folding stools. You shuffle inside with the rest of the jury pool, clutching your token like it's going to explain anything. It won't. You're now part of a citizen jury, possibly 500 men strong, selected by lottery, compensated with a small fee, not enough, and expected to determine the fate of someone accused of either petty fraud, insult, or general unpleasantness. It's hard to tell. A bored-looking official stands in the center, reading the charges off a plank of painted wood. The defendant, a baker named Simon, is accused of overcharging for sesame rolls and calling a customer an ill-bred donkey. The plaintiff, a man who looks like he once lost a debate and never recovered, insists this is not only insulting but economically destabilizing. You settle in for a long day. To your left, an elderly juror immediately dozes off. To your right, a man sharpens a stylus with unnecessary vigor. You try to appear alert but not too interested, a delicate balance here, where showing too much intelligence might imply political ambition, which is frowned upon unless you're already rich. The trial proceeds. There are no lawyers, just loud citizens shouting personal grievances in front of the jury. Witnesses speak. One says the rolls were dry. Another claims Simon laughed when asked for change. At no point is actual evidence presented. Someone passes around a sample of the offending sesame roll. You taste it. It's fine. The arguments escalate until the plaintiff begins invoking the wrath of Demeter, goddess of grain. Simon retorts by referencing a completely unrelated property dispute. The jury hums with interest. It's not clear whether this is due to the case or just the novelty of being indoors. At one point, a rooster walks in. No one stops it. The rooster seems to be a regular. You zone out. Your mind drifts to other aspects of ancient Athenian democracy, how decisions were made by thousands of citizens, how voting was done by pebble or bronze disc, how even the poor had a say if they could afford to take the day off work. Historians still debate whether this was a true democracy, you recall, given that women, slaves, and foreigners weren't included. Watching the process unfold, you're torn between admiration and disbelief. This is what pure democracy looks like: chaotic, loud, deeply personal, and somehow functional. Eventually, the court attendant passes around the voting discs. You're told to drop your disc into one of two urns, guilty or not guilty. There is no deliberation. There is no summary, just the clink of bronze on bronze as everyone makes a snap judgment and moves on with their lives. Simon is found guilty. His punishment: refund the customer and issue a public apology by shouting it 3 times in the agora while holding a stale roll aloft. Justice served. As the crowd disperses, you rub your temples. You've just helped shape Athenian jurisprudence. You've also developed a mild headache and an overwhelming desire for silence. Back outside, Nicias is waiting with 2 cups of diluted wine. "How was your first trial?" he grins. You shrug. "Educational." He laughs. "You'll get used to it, or you'll start pretending to be sick on jury days." You sip your wine and gaze out at the city. The temples shimmer in the heat. Children run barefoot over cracked tiles. Philosophers gather under colonnades to argue about the ideal form of a peach. And somewhere, a rooster is testifying in another trial. You're still new here, still sticky with olive residue and civic confusion. But for now, you've survived your first brush with democracy. Barely. You thought the worst was over. You thought jury duty and olive trees were the peak of physical and intellectual exhaustion. But now, Nicias has brought you to the gymnasium. It is, somehow, both more elegant and more alarming than you expected. The gymnasium is an open courtyard ringed with columns, surrounded by smaller rooms for bathing, massaging, and, unfortunately for you, philosophy. The place smells like sweat, oil, dust, and the faint trace of last night's garlic. Men of every age are already there, some wrestling, some running laps, some standing around flexing like they're posing for pottery. You immediately notice something else. No one is wearing clothes, not a single stitch. You clutch your tunic reflexively. Nicias raises an eyebrow. "Don't be shy," he says, dropping his own tunic to the ground in one casual sweep. "This is a place for virtue, not vanity." You mutter something about cultural context and start unwrapping yourself like a very nervous pita. Your feet are dusty. Your knees are too modern. You are not ready for ancient Greek nudity protocol. The ground is sanded and raked, soft underfoot. A pale youth is shadowboxing in the corner while an older man oils his calves with almost religious focus. You walk past a man doing stretches so elaborate you're not sure if he's exercising or exercising something. Nicias tosses you a leather ball. "We warm up with a piskyros," he says. You catch it barely. The game begins, and within moments you've been lightly tackled by someone reciting lines from Euripides. You stumble back, coughing dust, just in time to hear a philosopher shouting, "Is motion real or merely an illusion of the senses?" before tripping over a discus. Historians still argue whether these gymnasiums were primarily athletic, social, or intellectual hubs, you recall, moments before being gently body-checked by a man twice your size who apologizes with a bow and a quote from Pindar. The game ends mercifully. You're breathless, scraped, and deeply aware that you are the least impressive body in the entire courtyard. Someone starts singing a hymn to Apollo, while two others debate the ethical ramifications of sprinting. Then, it's time for the oil. A trainer approaches with a ceramic jug. He pours thick, fragrant olive oil into your hands. Rub down, he instructs. It keeps the skin supple, the muscles warm, and the flies confused. You follow suit, slipping and sliding like a baby dolphin. You are glistening and ashamed. Next comes the scraping. Yes, scraping. A strigil, a curved bronze tool, is used to remove the oil, sweat, and dust from your skin. The trainer scrapes you briskly while giving unsolicited advice on posture, digestion, and dating. You catch your reflection in a polished shield nearby. You look shiny, exhausted, slightly traumatized. After the oil and scraping, you're ushered into the tepidarium, a warm room where men recline on stone benches and mutter about taxes. The steam opens your pores, but also your anxieties. You overhear someone suggesting the Delphic oracle may be overrated. A heated argument erupts over gymnasium access for non-citizens. You pretend to meditate. Nicias nudges you. Hungry, he asks. You nod, but not just for food. You're starving for shade, for stillness, for some part of ancient Greece that doesn't involve oil or philosophical nudity. You dress quickly, too quickly, by local standards, and follow him back into the sunlight, reeking of time, oil, and confusion. The gymnasium has tested you. Your body is aching, your pride is questionable, and your sandals are now officially lost property. But you survived. You even caught the ball once. And next time, assuming there is one, you'll know to oil your elbows before you wrestle with a man named Thrasymachos, who believes in the moral neutrality of theft. You've barely escaped the gymnasium when Nicias insists it's time for lunch. You expect relief, maybe even a comfortable seat, and a moment to gather your thoughts. What you get instead is fish sauce, hard benches, and an argument about beans. Lunch in ancient Athens isn't a grand affair. It's practical, seasonal, and mildly suspicious. You're seated on a low stool at a long wooden table with several other citizens, each of whom seems personally offended by your posture. A large clay dish is placed in the center. Inside, boiled lentils, olives, barley porridge, and something dark and oily that smells like it came from the bottom of the sea. It's garum, fermented fish sauce, and it's everywhere. Eat, Nicias says cheerfully, tearing a barley flatbread in half and dipping it into the fishy concoction like it's totally normal. You follow suit. It's salty, it's sour, it might be alive. There's no cutlery, just fingers. Conversation flows in all directions. A merchant to your left is lamenting the price of Egyptian cumin. To your right, an elderly man swears that cucumbers cause melancholy and must be balanced with vinegar or vigorous poetry. You sip watered-down wine and try to chew silently. Every time you think the conversation is about to calm down, someone invokes Socrates or starts quoting a play. There's a passionate side debate over whether cheese should be grated or crumbled. Someone proposes legislation. Another person recites a limerick about onions and betrayal. Damaris, Menon's wife, arrives with a second tray grilled fish and a few wrinkled figs. You reach for one, only to be intercepted by a boy no older than 10 who growls, "First come, first fed." You let him win. He probably wrestles. You begin to understand why ancient Greek lunch was less a quiet reprieve and more a miniature symposium. Every meal is a stage. Every bite comes with a question. Historians still debate whether daily meals doubled as informal civic discussions, you think to yourself. If so, I want a refund. Nicias leans over and asks, "Do you think a man who owns no goats can be considered truly free?" You almost choke on an olive. You answer, carefully, that freedom is relative. This leads to a 20-minute exploration of personal virtue, debt, and the symbolic power of goat ownership. At one point, an old friend of Menon's arrives. He carries 2 jugs, one wine, one something he calls honey vinegar tonic. Everyone cheers. You wince. It tastes like punishment and salad dressing. As the meal winds down, someone pulls out a flute. Someone else starts clapping in rhythm. The boy who stole your fig begins reciting a comic scene from Aristophanes involving a misunderstood donkey. You're too full, too tired, and slightly too pickled in garum to follow the plot. And yet, there's something endearing about it. The community, the chaos, the way even a lunch of lentils and sarcasm can feel like a celebration. Your modern mind craves a nap, but your ancient self is starting to adapt. Kind of. As the sun shifts and the shadows grow longer, the table begins to clear. Crumbs are swept, cups rinsed and bellies patted. You stand slowly, stretch your aching legs, and thank Damaris with a bow. She snorts and mutters. He eats like a Spartan, but at least he listens. You take that as a compliment. Lunch is over. Your stomach is full of mysterious substances. Your brain is full of other people's opinions. You're not entirely sure what day it is anymore. But you survived another Athenian tradition. Barely. After lunch, you think maybe, just maybe, you'll be allowed a nap. But no, Nicias grins and says, "You're coming to a symposium." You assume that means more food. It does not. A symposium, in ancient Greece, is an after-dinner gathering of men, wine, and very strong opinions. It takes place in the Andren, a formal drinking room with reclining couches, oil lamps, and an eerie number of empty wine jugs. You're led inside, given a place to recline awkwardly, and immediately handed a cup that smells like regret. The host is a wealthy citizen named Theophrastos, who wears a wreath of ivy, quotes his own poetry, and insists on opening the evening with a song, played on the aulos, a double-piped flute, that sounds like a duck having an existential crisis. The room is lit by flickering lamps, and the intense gaze of a man who's clearly memorized every fragment of Hesiod. "Drink slowly," Nicias whispers. "There's no dignity in vomiting before the second toast. The wine is strong, too strong. It's been diluted, yes, but not nearly enough. You sip, it burns politely." The first round of conversation is about love, not in a romantic way, but in the deeply theoretical, what is the highest form of affection, and does it involve figs kind of way. You try to stay silent, it doesn't work. Someone asks you, "Do you believe the soul is drawn toward beauty or truth?" You panic and say, "Symmetry." This sparks a debate about whether noses are morally significant. As the night deepens, the topics get weirder. Someone brings up the ethics of selling lightning protection charms. Another guest passionately defends snails as nature's most misunderstood poets. You're not sure if it's the wine or the fumes from the oil lamps, but you start to find it all strangely hypnotic. Historians still argue whether symposia were intellectual salons or just elaborate excuses to drink, you recall. In this room, it is very clearly both. There's a performance. A guest recites a monologue about a man who falls in love with his reflection in a puddle. The audience snaps their fingers in appreciation, which you're told is the polite way to applaud without spilling your wine. Then comes the Scholion game, improvised poetry, passed around like a verbal hot potato. The rule, rhyme or retreat. You're caught off guard when the cup comes to you, and everyone chants, "New guy, new guy." You blurt a clumsy couplet about olives and fate. It's terrible. They love it. Someone breaks out a small lyre. Someone else spins a drinking game involving dice, a fig leaf, And the Iliad. A man named Callisthenes starts crying softly into his cup while reciting Sappho. It is both touching and deeply confusing. Eventually, people start to drift into half reclines. The wine has mellowed them. The questions become slower, more whispered. What is justice? Is the moon a goddess or just curious? Did my father ever actually love me? You lean back, eyes heavy. The oil lamps flicker low. The flute is played one last time, this time quietly, like a lullaby for the philosophically overwhelmed. You don't remember standing up. You just remember being gently prodded awake by Nicias, who hands you a fig and says, "You did well. You only contradicted 3 people." You stumble outside into the night. The air is cool. The stars above Athens burn like questions no one really expects to answer. You walk home slowly, fig in hand, realizing that a symposium isn't about being right, it's about showing up, sipping slowly, and saying something strange enough to be remembered. And maybe you did. It's early morning again, and the house is quiet, eerily so. You wake on your straw mat with a stiff back, wine-fogged memories of improvised poetry, and a faint taste of fig still clinging to your tongue. Damaris enters without knocking and hands you a coarse linen cloth. "You're not going to the men's quarters today," she says. "You're with us." Before you can protest, she's already leading you away from the main courtyard and into the back of the house, the gynecanitis, or women's quarters. In Athens, even households are divided along strict gender lines. While men like Menon and Nicias spend their days in the agora, shouting about olives and poetry, women manage the household, spinning, weaving, cooking, caring for children, and negotiating an entirely different social world behind closed doors. Damaris introduces you to her daughters, Timorete, age 12, and Felista, age 9, who regard you with cautious curiosity, then go back to arguing about which loom pattern is most appropriate for a wedding. You're seated on a small stool beside a pile of wool, and before long, someone hands you a spindle. You pretend to know what you're doing. You do not. The air smells of lavender, lamp oil, and something stewing quietly in the kitchen. Outside, you can hear the faint rumble of the agora. But here, in this shaded, quiet room, the rhythm is different. There's no shouting, no debating. Just the soft thrum of thread and whispered commentary about whose cousin ran off with a flute player. "We're not allowed to vote or speak at assemblies," Damaris says casually, "but we know things the men miss." You nod. "We know who cheats on whom. We know whose harvest will fail. We know what the priestesses whisper behind the altars," she lifts an eyebrow, "and we know where Menon keeps his emergency wine stash." Timorete offers you a dried apricot. "Do you have girls where you come from?" she asks. You nod, trying to explain that yes, in your time girls can be philosophers, politicians, even athletes. The entire room goes quiet. Felista tilts her head. "Do they still have to do spinning?" You hesitate. "Some, you say, but only if they want to." Timorete beams. "Then I want to be a goat dentist." No one corrects her. Damaris just smiles and mutters, "Better than a poet." The day moves gently. You help grind grain, mix flour, and learn how to fold a chiton without stabbing yourself with the fibula pin. There's a lot of work, so much constant, quiet labor, but it moves with a grace the agora never has. You start to notice the skill in it, the subtle hand motions, the efficient steps, the art of knowing what needs to be done before it's said aloud. Historians still debate how much freedom women in ancient Athens truly had, you recall. On paper, it was very little, but in the corners of domestic life, in the spaces between laws and public stages, they carved out realms of influence. You learn to carry water balanced on your head. You fail. Twice. You bandage a scraped knee. You grind herbs for a poultice. You listen to a whispered love poem that will never be read aloud. By the time the sun starts to set, you're emotionally full in a way that's hard to explain. These women, marginalized by law, absent from public life, are the invisible glue holding the city together. They birth its citizens, prepare its meals, mend its clothes, raise its philosophers, and bury its dead. Damaris walks you back to the threshold that separates the women's space from the rest of the house. "You did fine," she says, almost kindly. "Better than Menon's cousin," he cried during weaving. You step back into the main courtyard, blinking at the shift in light and energy. Nicias is arguing with someone about naval strategy, using a spoon as a model trireme. The noise crashes back around you. But in your mind, you can still hear the soft whisper of wool sliding through fingers and the quiet strength of a world behind the curtain. You're barely back in the main part of the house, still thinking about weaving and dried apricots, when Nicias announces, "We're visiting my uncle. He owns slaves." You blink. That's a lot. Slavery in ancient Athens is not hidden. It's not whispered about. It's embedded into the very fabric of society. 1 in 3 people here is enslaved, performing everything from housework to mining to tutoring rich children in Homeric verse. It's a deeply normalized horror, and you're about to walk right into it. Nicias's uncle, Dorion, lives on the outskirts of the city in a 2-story townhouse with a polished courtyard and a very smug goose. You're greeted at the door not by a family member, but by an enslaved man named Simmias, who opens the gate with a practiced smile and eyes that have seen too much. He's maybe 30, dressed plainly, and introduces himself as the steward. "Welcome," he says, bowing slightly. "Please don't step on the goose." You don't. Inside, everything is orderly, efficient, and just slightly too quiet. You're served wine by a girl no older than 12 who says nothing and avoids eye contact. Dorion appears moments later, rosy, loud, and proud of everything you wish you hadn't seen. "Here to show your foreign friend the foundations of the economy," he jokes, clapping Nicias on the back. Nicias laughs. You do not. You're ushered into the courtyard for more wine and a light snack, more barley, more olives, more discomfort. Dorion speaks loudly about Athens' greatness and how the empire's wealth flows through hands that are too fortunate to own themselves. He means Simmias. Simmias, who brings another jug of wine and refills your cup with a silence that aches. Nicias nudges you. Uncle's proud of his operation. 14 household slaves. Some are even educated. He says it like it's a tour highlight. You excuse yourself and ask if you can see the storage room. You're led there by Simmias, who walks ahead with quiet grace. As you descend a few steps into a shaded storeroom filled with amphorae and folded textiles, you finally ask him quietly, "Do you like it here?" He gives you a small bitter smile. "It is safe," he says, "for now." You talk for a few more minutes. He tells you he was once a teacher in Ephesus, that he was captured during a naval skirmish and sold here 2 years ago, that he still writes poetry in his head, though he has no papyrus to spare, that he's learned how to disappear while being seen. Historians still argue whether Athenian slaves had it better than others, you recall. House slaves were closer to families, sometimes trusted, but that never erased the fact of ownership. Simmias doesn't need to say it. It's in his every movement. When you return to the courtyard, Dorion is laughing about a slave who once dropped a vase and was politely relocated to the mines. Nicias claps. You stare at your cup and wish it were empty. The visit ends with a casual gift. Dorion offers Nicias a bottle of imported oil. "Pressed by Carian hands," he says proudly, as if that makes it finer. You say goodbye to Simmias, who bows again, this time more slowly. You walk back in silence. The streets are still warm from the sun, the noise of the agora grows louder as you approach home, but your mind is stuck on that quiet storage room, on Simmias's poetry locked behind his eyes, on the child pouring wine in silence. Ancient Greece prides itself on freedom, you think, for some. You reach Menon's house and step inside, the smell of lentils and clay returning like an old strange blanket. You're grateful for the noise, for the chaos, but part of you stays behind in that silent room with too much order. You've seen the undercurrent now, and there's no unseeing it. Nicias is unusually quiet as you sit together on the rooftop that evening, watching the last rays of sun slip behind the temples. Below, the city hums with the sounds of dinner preparation, clanging pots, shouted instructions, a goat that simply refuses to stop complaining. You're hoping for a calm moment. Then he says it, "My father wants me to get married." You choke slightly on your barley biscuit. "Oh?" He nods grimly. "To a girl I've never met. Her dowry includes 2 goats and a corner plot in the olive grove." A pause. "I'm not sure I like goats that much." In ancient Athens, marriage is less about romance and more about alliances, property, and producing male citizens. Love is optional. Practicality is law, and for someone like Nicias, a citizen male of eligible age, it's simply expected. To distract him, you ask about weddings. He lights up just enough to complain. The typical Athenian wedding is a 3-day ordeal filled with ritual bathing, torch processions, and bread shaped like moons. There's a feast, a solemn handoff from father to husband, and a ceremonial cart ride for the bride, who may be as young as 14 while everyone throws nuts at her. Symbolism is important. You ask what the bride gets to say about all this. Nicias shrugs. She gets new clothes, and maybe a kitten. You both fall silent. Later, back downstairs, you catch the end of a domestic dispute between Menon and Damaris. It's hard to follow, but it seems to involve a broken cooking pot, a missing coin, and something cryptic about the neighbor's cousin. Their voices rise. The kids freeze. You try to melt into the clay wall. It ends as quickly as it began, with Menon sighing and retreating to the courtyard. Damaris mutters something about men with opinions and no sense. She sees you, gives you a tight smile, and resumes kneading dough. Marriage, you realize, is a cornerstone of this society and a battlefield of its own. You learn that men are expected to marry by 30, women often by 15. Fidelity is encouraged, but in practice it's a flexible concept, especially for men. Heteri, high-status courtesans, often have more intellectual freedom than wives, but wives run the household, raise the children, manage the slaves, and maintain the family's reputation. Historians still debate how deeply affection factored into Greek marriages, you think. But it's clear the structure was built for function, not fulfillment. That night, a neighbor throws a wedding feast. You're invited by proximity. The whole street smells like honey cakes and lamb. Music spills out from the doorway. Inside, guests toast the young couple with wine and hopeful platitudes. The bride is impossibly young. The groom looks nervous. A poet recites a verse about swans and destiny. Someone drops a fig in the punch. You find Nicias near the back, chewing thoughtfully. "Maybe I'll learn to like goats," he mutters. You pat his shoulder and try to smile. Love might not be a requirement here, but hope lingers in the corners. Maybe over time, affection will grow. Or maybe they'll just become experts at tolerating each other's habits. Back at the house, Menon snores loudly. Damaris sharpens a knife without comment. You fall asleep wondering how many couples in this city are dreaming of something more than 2 goats and a strategic marriage contract. You wake up groggy, aching, and a little sticky from yesterday's goat-adjacent wedding feast. Menon greets you at breakfast with a grunt, and a surprisingly enthusiastic announcement: "You're coming to the Phoenix today." You blink at your barley bread. "The what now?" He rolls his eyes. "The hill, the assembly, the heart of the city, you idiot." And with that, you're off marching uphill in the morning sun toward the place where Athenian democracy literally shouts itself into being. The Phoenix is a natural amphitheater carved into a rocky slope, offering a commanding view of the Acropolis and, on clear days, the sea. But you're not here for the view. You're here for a civic spectacle. Several thousand free male citizens gathering to discuss, debate, and vote on everything from grain tariffs to naval strategies to whether or not to exile someone named Cleon again. You arrive early, but already the space is buzzing. Some men carry benches. Others are selling roasted chickpeas or time-infused wine from sloshing amphorae. It feels less like a government session and more like an aggressive outdoor festival where everyone's a speaker. Menon finds a seat in the shade and starts waving over friends. You're stuck in the middle of a boisterous cluster of men with booming voices and strong opinions. The herald shouts for silence. No one listens. Eventually, a man with an impressively large beard steps up to the bema, the speaker's platform, and raises his hands. The crowd hushes. "Fellow citizens," he begins, "today we must decide whether to increase the number of public toilets near the agora." A cheer erupts, someone boos, a debate begins. One speaker argues that more toilets mean fewer complaints from visitors. Another insists it's a waste of marble. Someone behind you mutters, "This is just because Glaucos fell in again last week." The room, well, the hill divides quickly into factions. The toilet expansionist versus the budget traditionalists. You're stunned, not by the topic but by the passion. These men are not just talking, they're shaping policy, and they're doing it with zero microphones, minimal moderation, and a terrifying amount of personal anecdote. Historians still argue whether direct democracy in Athens was efficient or chaotic. You recall watching one citizen try to mime faulty plumbing with a wine jug, but no one doubts it was participatory. The next motion concerns military funding. The mood darkens. Nicias the general, not your roommate, proposes a new trireme tax. Boos rise like smoke. A man nearby threatens to throw his sandal. You duck. You glance around and notice who's not here. Women, slaves, foreigners, anyone under 20. The democracy is real but bounded. It's loud, proud, and deeply exclusive. Eventually, votes are cast, tiny bronze discs dropped into urns, with careful attention from the tallying slaves. The toilet expansionists win by a narrow margin. Glaucos will finally be able to sit in dignity. You leave the Phoenix blinking in the sunlight, your ears ringing with civic fury. Menon pats you on the back. That, he says, is freedom. You nod, though your head is still spinning. Back at the house, Damaris hands you a cup of mint water and says, "Let me guess, they argued about toilets again?" You blink, "Yes?" She rolls her eyes. "They've been arguing about toilets since Solon." That night you lie on your mat and think about all the voices you heard. The pride, the chaos, the stubborn belief that every voice mattered, even the loudest, strangest, least informed ones. It's messy, it's flawed, it's democracy, and today you got to vote on a bathroom. You've barely finished digesting the democratic toilet drama when Menon throws a new assignment your way: imperial audits. It sounds fancy, possibly important. It is not. Your job today? Trail behind a mid-level Athenian bureaucrat named Phaidon as he inspects public storage areas, market weights, and the occasional suspicious goat. It's paperwork with sandals, and it turns out to be one of the most revealing windows into the inner workings of ancient Greece. Phaidon meets you at dawn wearing a tunic with too many wrinkles and the expression of someone who's been overworked since birth. He carries a scroll case, a wax tablet, and a long stick which he occasionally uses to prod amphorae or goats, depending on who's in the way. "We begin at the grain depot," he says, not looking up. "Try to walk quietly." You try, you fail. Your sandals slap loudly on the stone, and a passing child giggles as you trip over a sleeping cat. The grain depot is a warehouse stacked with amphorae sealed with wax and stamped with city symbols. Phaidon opens them one by one, sniffs, squints, and mutters about grain volume discrepancies. You offer to help count. He gives you a look that says, "I've seen marble statues more helpful." From there, you move on to the fish scales, literal ones, used by market vendors to weigh salted anchovies. Phaidon is meticulous. He weighs, records, frowns. At one stall, he confiscates a weight that's been filed down on one side. "They always blame the nephew," he says, sighing. Next stop, the goat yard. Apparently, goats can be rented from the city for public grass trimming purposes. You don't know why this surprises you anymore. A quick inspection reveals that several goats are not city-issued, but smuggled in from Aegina, an island with notoriously devious goats. "You can tell by the ears," Phaidon whispers, as if revealing state secrets. You pass a scribe, hunched over a column, chiseling an announcement about upcoming civic games. Further down, two older men are arguing whether municipal funds should be redirected to repair a cracked statue of Athena's owl. You mentally file it under "Things I did not expect to witness today." The audit continues, checking temple donations, inspecting road stones, counting official sandals. You're given the sacred task of confirming whether the jars of honey at a public altar are properly sealed. They are, but you accidentally eat one fig offering before Phaidon yells, "That's sacred." Oops. Historians still debate whether Athens' civic bureaucracy was over-regulated or impressively thorough, you think, as Phaidon scribbles another note. "Judging by today, it's both." By midday, you're sunburned, dust-covered, and carrying a stack of confiscated spoons. Phaidon mumbles about lunch and hands you a coin to fetch his favorite barley wrap. You return to find him lecturing a dog that refuses to leave the vinegar stall. You sit together on the edge of a fountain, munching barley wraps and discussing nothing. It's the most peaceful moment you've had all week. Phaidon finally looks at you and says, "You know, it's not about the weights. It's about the city knowing someone's watching. Even the goats behave better when they think they'll be counted." You nod. It makes sense. Athens isn't held together just by statues and speeches. It runs on stamps, ledgers, and tired men with sticks who argue with livestock. Later that evening, you return home with sore feet, ink-stained fingers, and a newfound respect for public records. Menon barely looks up when you enter. "Lose any goats?" he asks. "Only the illegal ones," you reply. He grins. That night, you fall asleep thinking about honey jars, counterfeit fish weights, and the noble, quiet grind of civic oversight. You've never been more exhausted, or more certain that ancient Greece runs on goat math and sheer determination. The sun hasn't even cleared the Acropolis when Menon delivers the morning news. Nicias is sulking. His brother's returned. You blink. He has a brother? Menon rolls his eyes. Yes, and like most older brothers, he thinks he should be in charge of something. It turns out Nicias has an older sibling named Themistocles. Same family, same nose, wildly different personality. He's just returned from a stint as a hoplite in a distant garrison, and now struts around the courtyard like a peacock dipped in bronze. He quotes generals instead of poets, and critiques your posture within 5 minutes of meeting you. The tension is immediate, where Nicias is curious, distracted, and always 2 sentences deep into a philosophical rabbit hole. Themistocles is blunt, loud, and obsessed with glory. He speaks only in declaratives. Men must sweat. Figs are for thinkers. The gods favor discipline. You sip your barley water and try not to look nervous. At breakfast, the argument begins. I'm the eldest, Themistocles says, stabbing a boiled onion with intent. I should manage the grove. You barely know which end of the olive is edible, Nicias replies calmly. Damaris mutters something about grown men and misplaced sandals. Menon sighs into his cup. The tension simmers all day. Themistocles lectures Nicias on wasted potential, and Nicias responds by misquoting Heraclitus until everyone's too confused to continue. By midday, you find yourself stuck between them and the courtyard, holding a basket of laundry and trying to look invisible. It doesn't work. What do you think? Themistocles asks. Should Athens be ruled by scholars or warriors? You mumble something neutral about balance and immediately regret it. The debate ignites again. Historians still argue how much family status influenced political life in Athens, you recall, ducking behind a fig tree. But clearly, at home, hierarchy is everything. You soon learn that succession isn't just a matter of birth order here, it's about reputation, about respect, about who fetched the better amphora during the plague of 39. Every minor achievement becomes fuel for dominance. That evening, the real drama unfolds when Themistocles announces he's arranging his own betrothal to a wealthier neighbor's daughter, with land, he adds, and a view of the hills. Nicias turns to you and mutters, and no personality. Menon shrugs. It's a smart match. Nicias doesn't speak to anyone for the rest of the evening. Later, you find him up on the rooftop again, staring at the stars. You ever feel like you were born just to prove someone else right or wrong? He asks. You don't have a great answer. You offer him a piece of fig cake instead. He accepts it without a word. It's the kind of sibling rivalry that shapes everything in this city: inheritance, politics, pride. Themistocles wants glory. Nicias wants freedom. The city wants both in different ratios at different times. Eventually, the stars brighten. Nicias lies back on the tiles. He'll take over the grove, he says. Fine, let him. A pause. I'll just write a play about it. Make him a goat. You both laugh quietly. And for now, the city sleeps. You wake to the scent of something exotic and slightly overripe. Downstairs, the household is abuzz with news. An ambassador from somewhere called Macedonia has arrived, and he's brought gifts, rare fruits, news of foreign wars, and possibly an opinion about everything. At breakfast, Menon explains. He's not from the court of Alexander, he says. Too early for that, but he knows someone who knows someone in Pella. This, apparently, is reason enough for a civic welcome. You're instructed to behave, wear a clean tunic, and not ask too many questions. So naturally, you do all three badly. The ambassador is named Aristandros. He arrives with 2 porters, a silver-threaded cloak, and an expression of mild disdain. He speaks fluent Athenian Greek but pronounces everything like it's a challenge. You have very small olives, he says, sniffing one. The gift basket he offers includes pomegranates the size of your head, figs that look like they've been carved from honey, and a handful of what he proudly calls royal cucumbers. No one knows what to do with those. Nicias pokes one suspiciously. But what steals the show is a wooden box containing something no one has seen before: a pineapple. It's lumpy, smells absurdly sweet, and has tiny spikes that make it both terrifying and magnetic. The entire household gathers around like it's a sacred relic. Even Damaris looks impressed. Aristandros declares it the tongue of Apollo. No one's entirely sure what that means, but everyone nods. He also brings scrolls with strange diagrams, maps of the north, sketches of new siege towers, and a drawing of a very muscular horse wearing armor. "The future of war," he announces, beaming. Menon, unimpressed, replies, "We once won a battle using sharpened sticks and a screaming goat." The conversation drifts to politics. Aristandros complains about Athenian sewage. Menon counters with a proud speech about democracy's resilience. Damaris rolls her eyes and passes around slices of cucumber with salt. Historians still debate how foreign emissaries were received in domestic Greek homes, you think, watching Aristandros attempt to explain how they dye tunics blue in Illyria. It seems to involve flattery, food, and barely restrained sarcasm. Nicias, as always, tries to turn the topic toward philosophy. "Do you believe peace is the natural state of man?" he asks. Aristandros shrugs, "Only when we're too full to fight." The rest of the day becomes a kind of cultural exchange. Aristandros teaches you a northern drinking game involving dice and rhyming curses. You try to explain a knock-knock joke. It fails spectacularly. In the afternoon, he requests a bath and is gently steered away from the family basin and toward the public bathhouse. "Let the city appreciate his cucumbers," Damaris mutters. That evening, after a farewell toast involving honeyed wine and a poem from Timurit about figs and empire, Aristandros departs. The house feels somehow quieter without him. Less dramatic, more familiar. Nicias joins you on the rooftop again. "That man has opinions about everything," he says. You nod, "and some very intimidating fruit." He grins. "I'm writing a new play. A northern diplomat gets defeated by a talking fig." You laugh. The city glows beneath you. Today was strange, surreal, slightly sticky, but it reminded you, ancient Greece isn't a closed bubble. It's open, curious, occasionally snarky, and once in a while it gets surprised by a pineapple. You didn't think it was possible, but Athens has become louder, not from crowds or debates, but from the rocks themselves. You first notice it walking through the agora. There, carved into a boulder by the fountain, are words, "Be honest, clean your tools, do not mock the lame." Below that, in smaller letters, "By order of the people and also Nicias, probably." You point it out. Nicias shrugs. "Dharma stones," he says. "Well, not literally, but that's what we're calling them." Apparently, someone got the idea from traveling in the East, India, maybe, or Persia. The notion, public moral guidance etched in stone, visible to all. Now Athens is getting in on the trend. Messages of virtue carved into rocks, pillars, doorposts, any surface that doesn't move. One near the gymnasium reads, "Do not oil in excess. Humility is also a form of strength." Another, outside a fish vendor's stall, "Do not overcharge for old mackerel." There's even one on a goat. Someone scratched, "Silence is a form of wisdom," onto a clay bell tied around its neck. The goat does not seem wiser. At first it's quirky, then it gets competitive. A stonemason named Lysias starts chipping edicts into marble slabs and charging 2 obols for customized morality. He's quickly overwhelmed with requests, advice for children, warnings for drunks, polite insults for neighbors. Some ask for poems. Others want illustrated fables featuring clever owls and tragic figs. You stumble across one near the latrines that reads, "If it smells, do not blame the gods. Clean it." Beneath it, someone's added, "or at least warn others." The assembly tries to regulate it. Of course they do. A formal committee is formed, the Bureau of Ethical Inscriptions. They hold a debate on which virtues are public approved. It ends with a standoff over whether generosity counts if it comes with a receipt. Historians still argue whether these moral carvings were a grassroots movement or state-sponsored, you recall. Watching a man chip, do not eat all the grapes into a wine jug, probably both. Nicias, unsurprisingly, starts composing his own. He tests a few on you. Do not mock bad poets, they may be your cousin. Laundry is a form of civic responsibility. The gods are watching, even during naps. He insists on carving the last one into a stone near Menon's workshop. Menon threatens to turn him into a bench. You help carry a few stones yourself. It's back-breaking work. You drop one. It lands next to a cat, which immediately climbs onto it and falls asleep. A week later, someone carves under that cat. Rest is a form of wisdom. Soon it feels like the entire city is talking, walls whispering instructions, stairwells offering encouragement, pillars telling you not to argue with your aunt. It's charming, odd, and occasionally intrusive. You pass a column on the way to the bathhouse that says, "Bathe thyself, or thy friends will have to." You hurry. But amid the humor and repetition, you notice something else. People are reading them and talking about them, not just mocking but reflecting. A man at the fish stall argues less. A boy stops and helps a cart driver untangle a rope. A philosopher admits he might have been wrong about socks. Something is shifting. That night, as you lie under the stars on the rooftop, Nicias sketches new ideas into the clay tiles with a stick. You ask him what he'd carve if he could only leave one message for future generations. He thinks, then says softly, "Be kind, even when you're tired." You nod. The city sleeps, surrounded by stones that now carry thoughts. Thoughts from bakers, poets, old men, young girls, maybe even from you. And maybe, just maybe, Athens is listening. By now, you've adjusted to a lot of strange customs: fig-based diplomacy, barefoot bureaucracies, goat-based property arguments. But nothing prepares you for Nicias's new obsession, becoming a pilgrim. He announces it at breakfast, mouth full of boiled barley. "I'm going to Eleusis," he says. "I want to see the mysteries." You blink. Mysteries? He nods solemnly. Sacred rites, secret knowledge, possibly a chance to eat better bread. The Eleusinian mysteries, among the most famous and closely guarded religious rites in all of Greece, are dedicated to Demeter and Persephone. They promise initiates a deeper understanding of life, death, and the agricultural cycle. But mostly, they promise status, stories, and, oddly enough, better sleep. It's a 30-mile journey on foot, in sandals. You go. The road is long, dusty, and filled with the kind of philosophical arguments that seem to sprout wherever Nicias walks. You pass farmers harvesting late barley, herders guiding stubborn pigs, and a man loudly reciting his own version of the Iliad with added jokes. At one point, you encounter a woman dressed in white who claims to be the official bread taster of the goddess. She gives you a roll. It's amazing. You suspect divine yeast. You sleep on straw mats in roadside shrines. You wash in cold streams. You begin to appreciate the art of packing light, especially when your companion brings 2 scrolls, 3 tunics, and a lyre he cannot play. The closer you get to Eleusis, the more the atmosphere changes. Travelers become quieter. Some chant, others fast. There's talk of purification rituals, symbolic rebirths, and visions of the afterlife. No one explains anything clearly, which seems to be part of the experience. Historians still argue over what actually happened during the Eleusinian mysteries, you remember. Initiates were sworn to secrecy, and remarkably, most of them kept it. When you arrive at the sanctuary gates, the mood is reverent. Torches are lit, incense floats through the air. You're ushered into a large columned hall with dozens of others, all wearing simple robes and very serious expressions. The rituals begin. You drink a barley-based potion called kaikon, thick, bitter, possibly fermented. There's chanting, dancing, a symbolic descent into darkness. You're blindfolded at one point. You hear weeping, then laughter, then a very loud sneeze that breaks the mood briefly. No one will explain what's happening. No one breaks character. At the climax, something is revealed. You're not allowed to describe it. You're not even sure what it was. A symbol, a light, a whispered word. Nicias later calls it a turnip that glowed. You suspect he's joking. You hope he's joking. Afterward, the initiates emerge slowly, blinking in the torchlight. Some are crying, others are silent. You feel lighter, not transformed exactly, but like you've been let in on a very old joke you only half understand. Back in Athens days later, the city feels changed. Or maybe you do. You walk differently, think differently. You now suspect every vegetable of being a possible spiritual metaphor. Nicias writes a poem. It's terrible, but heartfelt. Damaris hears about your journey and snorts. So you walked 60 miles, drank spoiled grain, and now you think you're wise. You smile, maybe. She hands you a fig, welcome back. That night, you lie on the rooftop under familiar stars, remembering the chants, the flickering light, the soft hush of reverence. You still don't know what you saw, but it feels like something important, even if it was just a glowing vegetable. You're jolted awake by screaming. Not the usual rooster or philosopher kind, but something distinctly more slithery. You bolt upright on your straw mat. Damaris is yelling from the kitchen. Timorete is perched on a stool, shrieking. Menon is holding a broom like a spear, and slithering calmly across the courtyard is a snake. Not just one snake, two. You blink. Should we burn something? No, Damaris snaps, that's bad luck. Nicias runs in with a clay pot. We're supposed to entreat them, he says breathlessly. They might be omens. You stare at the snakes. They stare back. One flicks its tongue in a way that suggests disinterest, possibly mild judgment. Apparently, snakes in the home are a complicated matter in ancient Greece. In some regions, they're signs of divine protection, especially if associated with household gods or healing deities like Asclepius. In others, they're just pest control with strong PR. Menon swings the broom. Damaris swats him. You'll curse the house, she warns. So begins the Great Serpent Compromise of 430 BCE. A large basket is retrieved. Olive oil is sprinkled at the doorway. Timorete throws flower petals for reasons no one questions. You're handed a stick and told, just guide them gently. You consider going back to bed. Eventually, the snakes retreat on their own, sliding under a stone near the oven. Everyone exhales. Menon mumbles a prayer. Felista names them Euripides and Baiti. The rest of the day is twitchy. Every shadow looks like a tail. Every chord feels like a threat. Damaris burns sage and sprinkles sea salt along the thresholds. Nicias starts composing a poem about transformation and scaly wisdom. Over lunch, a neighbor stops by and casually mentions that her cousin once adopted a snake as a kitchen guardian. Laid eggs in the spice jar, she says, shrugging. Best lentil seasoning we ever had. You excuse yourself from the table. Later, you hear whispers about whether the snakes were sent by Apollo, or Demeter, or maybe just really unlucky mice. You're not sure what you believe anymore. You begin stepping more carefully in sandals. You develop a habit of tapping walls with a stick before sitting down. Historians still debate how seriously Greeks viewed animal omens, you recall. But most agree snakes had a special place, feared, respected, and sometimes welcomed. That night, just before bed, Menon sprinkles flour near the hearth. To see if they return, he explains. They don't. But something shifts in the house. Conversations are quieter, movements more measured. Nicias insists the snakes were a message, he won't say from whom. Even the goats are subdued. You fall asleep with your sandals nearby, just in case. You dream of temples filled with hissing, scrolls written in serpentine script, and a fig that bites back. You wake up grateful to see only mosquitoes. You wake to the smell of rice, soft, sticky, spiced with something unfamiliar and, frankly, a little hopeful. Damaris is humming, the courtyard is calm, even the goat seems to be on its best behavior. Nicias greets you with a gentle pat on the shoulder. Today, he says, we do nothing. You raise an eyebrow. Okay, he amends, we do very little, but we do it slowly. It's the closest thing Athens has to a rest day, not religious, not state-sanctioned, just a collective shrug toward effort. Even Menon has pulled a stool into the shade and is sharpening a chisel with the intensity of a man pretending to be productive. Breakfast is soft rice drizzled with honey, a luxury, you're told, imported from Egypt, stored carefully, saved for days when teeth are tired and tempers are fragile. The city moves slower today. Market stalls open late. No shouting, no trials. Even the philosophical shouting has been replaced with light muttering. Nicias takes you to a shaded grove just outside the city walls. You lie beneath an olive tree, watching sunlight filter through dusty green leaves. Birds chirp without urgency. A turtle trudges past, wise and unbothered. He offers you a papyrus scroll, a poem about clouds, written by a man who once claimed to argue with thunder. It's absurd and perfect. Historians still debate whether the Greeks had a concept of leisure as we know it, you muse, reading aloud a line about lazy gods and golden naps. But clearly they knew when to slow down. Later, you help Damaris mix herbs for a salve she swears will cure elbow rage. You're not sure that's a real condition, but the mint smell is soothing. Menon finally speaks. Old age is just slow youth with better wine. The children play quietly with goat bones. Nicias writes a haiku about silence. You spend 10 full minutes watching a drop of olive oil slide down a clay bowl. And in this stillness, something shifts. You realize how loud your thoughts usually are, how used you've become to noise, speed, planning. Here, in this moment, in this impossibly old courtyard, you're allowed to be nothing for a while. As dusk falls, you share a plate of warm barley cakes. Damaris sips her wine and says, I might forgive Menon. He fixed the stool. Menon nods, not meeting her eyes. That's their version of a love letter. Nicias asks if you've ever been truly still before. You don't answer. You just sit with him, watching the sky fade from ochre to plum. That night the household sleeps early. No scrolls, no debates, even the dreams feel hushed. You lie on your mat, full of soft rice and softer thoughts. For once, there is nothing to solve, nothing to chase. Just breath, and stars, and the creaking sigh of an ancient city learning how to pause. Morning comes with a breeze, cool and clean, sweeping through the courtyard like a curtain drawn back. You wake slowly, every limb heavy but rested, like your body finally understands the rhythm of this place. The sounds of the city are gentler today, no arguments, no urgent steps, just the low rustle of palm fronds and the soft clink of amphorae. Nicias meets you with a quiet smile. We're going to say goodbye to the elephant, he says. You blink. We had an elephant? He laughs. Not really, it's a nickname, come on. The walk is familiar now past the olive grove, the agora, the sun-bleached statue of a philosopher whose nose has long since worn away. You pass the baker who once offered you burnt barley, and he nods. You nod back. You've become part of the scenery, a background figure in someone else's scroll. The so-called elephant is a large, elderly mule named Archon, kept in a small stable near the edge of the city. Nicias explains, he was once used in processions, always decorated, always dignified. Now he mostly eats figs and naps. Archon does indeed look like a noble beast in retirement. You feed him a fig, he accepts it like a small prince. I come here when I need to remember things, Nicias says, gently scratching the mule's ear. It helps to talk to something that doesn't interrupt. The two of you sit in silence beside Archon's pen, watching the sun rise a little higher. It's the end of your time here. You can feel it. The tunic fits better now. Your hands are tougher, your mind quieter. You walk home slowly, memorizing everything. The slant of the sun over clay rooftops, the shape of Damaris's laugh as she scolds Felista for climbing the fig tree again, the way Menon wipes his hands on his apron before pretending not to be proud of his children. You help sweep the courtyard one last time, fold linens, share a final bowl of lentil stew. Nicias gives you a scroll with a terrible poem. You thank him like it's gold. That evening, the whole household gathers on the rooftop. No big speeches, just figs, wine, and soft conversation. Stars appear one by one. The air smells like thyme and cool stone. And when it's time, you stand. Nicias claps you on the shoulder. You did better than most, he says. You didn't scream, and you only insulted one minor deity. Damaris hands you a small pouch. Olive soap, she says. You need it. Menon grunts. Tell your people we still make the best sandals. You bow. And then, quietly, you step away, through the shadows of the alleyways, past the last shuttered stall, into the blur of time. Athens fades behind you. But it stays with you, its rhythm, its contradictions, its figs, its flaws. You didn't last a day in ancient Greece. You lasted many, and now you carry a little piece of it with you. Because in a world of scrolls and sandals, gods and goats, rice and rhetoric, you learned something simple. You were never meant to survive it. You were meant to remember it. Now just rest. Let the weight of the city slip from your shoulders. Let the sound of sandals on sun-baked stone fade from your ears. You've walked a long way, across centuries, across customs and questions and conversations too wide for one sitting. You felt the olive oil between your fingers, sat in courtyards filled with dust and dinner, watched the stars from rooftops made of laughter and lime. You've seen the quiet power in shared bread, heard the hush of a snake in a clay pot, felt the strange calm of democracy shouted from a hilltop. And now, it's enough. There's no need to hold on tightly. The city will still be there, crumbling softly in the background of memory, a little louder than you remember, and a little more familiar than you'd expect. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts blur like the painted borders of an old amphora. You are not in a story anymore. You are in stillness. There are no more olives to count, no goats to name, no verdicts to cast, just the soft hum of sleep gathering around your edges like a warm linen sheet. You did it. You lasted a day in ancient Greece. Now let go of the agora, let go of the dust, let go of the sandals, and drift.